New Hampshire Republicans are at it again. They passed their latest voter suppression law targeting young voters. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started. New Hampshire Republicans have enacted a new law, HB 1569, that requires voters to show documentary proof of citizenship when registering to vote or casting a ballot. Now, this law will not go into effect until after the 2024 election. But Marc, what's the motivation behind the law?
I mean, we know the motivation behind the law. They want to make it harder for young people to vote, particularly students to vote. Here's a statistic I tell people that they are always a little bit surprised, but New Hampshire actually has the highest percentage of potential voters who are in college. So in 2017, over 11% of the state's population was college students. Most of those are out-of-staters, right? Because, think about it, that's a lot of college students in a state that doesn't have a huge population. And they have a lot of nationally recognized universities and colleges. And so you have a lot of out-of-state students. And so they have been, for years, dreaming up new ways to pass laws that target college students. And some of them, Paige, I have to say, have been quite ingenious over the years. And, they have been litigated. A lot of them have been struck down. Some of them have survived. Some of them have survived in part, but not in whole. But the Republican legislature of New Hampshire, and it is a Republican legislature, people think of it as a blue state, and that legislature can flip back and forth, but it is right now a Republican legislature. They have, like I said, been doggedly committed to finding new laws and new ways to disenfranchise the college student population, because they think that that is their ticket to electoral victory. It is not convincing those students that Republicans have better policies. It's not convincing them that Republicans are looking out for voters like them. It is instead sending a very clear message to those students: don't vote in the Granite State. We don't want you voting here, and we are going to pass laws seriatim to try to prevent you from doing so.
And why would a law that requires documentary proof of citizenship disproportionately affect young voters like college students?
All right, so this is a really important point that people need to hear, because oftentimes the immediate reaction people have to these proof of citizenship laws is to immediately say, this law is unnecessary because non-citizens don't vote. There's already a federal law against them voting, and they are not going to risk the criminal penalties with doing so. And that is true, by the way. That is, everything I just said is true. It is already prohibited by federal law for them to vote in federal elections. They don't vote in any significant numbers, if any. So it's not a problem. But I think that if we end the discussion there, Paige, we are missing the other half of the equation of what Republicans are trying to do, which is that these proof of citizenship laws target young voters. They don't target non-citizen voters, they target young voters. Why do I say that? Because in order to register under these laws, you need to prove at the time that you register that you are a U.S. citizen. Well, how do you prove you're a U.S. citizen? There are only really two documents that most people have who are U.S. citizens to prove their citizenship. Number one, an original or certified birth certificate. Number two, a U.S. passport. Okay, that's it. Like, a driver's license is not proof of citizenship. Paige, you and I talked about this in an earlier episode about North Carolina and foreign students. Like, student IDs are not proof of citizenship. Driver's licenses are not proof of citizenship. None of the documents that people think of as ID prove citizenship. The thing that proves citizenship is that you have a U.S. passport, which let's be honest, a lot of young people don't have reasons to have U.S. passports. So they don't have that. And so then they're left only with the question of whether they have an original or a certified copy of a birth certificate. And many young people don't keep their birth certificate with them in their college dorm, right? It's in a safe deposit box in their parents', under their parents' control, or it's in their parents', lockbox in their house. And it's not something they have. So it disproportionately hits these young voters because they don't actually have the documents to prove they are U.S. citizens, even though they are clearly U.S. citizens.
Marc, the claim we'll also see a lot around student voters is that they're double voters. They're voting at their college address and at their home address. Let's be clear, that doesn't happen. They vote at one or the other. They're only casting one ballot, but they have a right to vote at their college address. They are living in that community. They're there for presumably 4 years. they have the right to vote in the local elections that will affect them as a student.
Yeah, and it's, by the way, it's a misconception that people have that college students are voting in, or even are trying to vote in both locations. The tragedy of America right now is that college students are oftentimes shut out for voting at all. Okay. It is not that they have a panoply of options of where to vote. It is that they have a paucity of options where to vote. Because at the same time that states like New Hampshire and others are making it harder for college students to vote where they believe, for those college students who have established residence and domicile in New Hampshire, you have other states like your home state of Texas that has basically made it impossible for college students to register for the first time in Texas if in fact they are living in New Hampshire, right? So Texas has a law that says you have to actually be physically living at an address in Texas at the time you register. Well, if that 18-year-old is physically living in New Hampshire, they are being told by New Hampshire, don't vote here. They're being told by Texas, well, don't register here. And so the truth is college students and young voters in general are among the most disfavored population of voters in the country. There is a reason why when you look at voter registration rates, when you look at voter participation rates, young voters always trail below other age cohorts. And it is not because they're not interested in politics. It is because the obstacles that Republican legislatures have put in place to make it hard for these young voters to vote, is just in many instances the last barrier. It is the extra hurdle that prevents these voters from participating.
Marc, and young voters are now in court fighting against this law.
Yeah, I'm very proud that my law firm actually brought a lawsuit on behalf of a group of young voters to fight back against this law. And, I said publicly that when the governor was considering signing this law, if he signed it, New Hampshire would be sued. New Hampshire has now been sued. That lawsuit is going to proceed. And I predict that before the 2026 elections, which will be the next round of elections, when this law would be in effect, New Hampshire will lose. And the shame is the governor will be out of office. The state legislature, they may or may not be the same people, but I hope the voters hold the Republicans accountable for why they are wasting taxpayer money passing these laws, why they are demonizing 11% of the potential electorate in their state. And by the way, a big economic driver of their state is the education system. There was a time when New Hampshire took enormous pride in being the center of so many vibrant universities, and they still claim to, but then this is how they treat those students. So this lawsuit is proceeding, and everyone should stay tuned and subscribe to Democracy Docket, where you will be kept up to date on what is happening in that lawsuit and all of the other important cases around the country.
As we said earlier, this law doesn't go into effect until after the 2024 election, but Governor Sununu signed it in mid-September. Why sign a law like this that completely transforms the state election system mere months before an election where it won't be in effect?
Yeah. So look, there are a lot of people who have, cited Governor Sununu as a so-called moderate Republican. I'm not sure what that exactly means. He is going to vote for Donald Trump. And now he has signed just a straight up voter suppression law. So what's tragic about this situation in North Carolina is he knows this law isn't needed. He knows this is a bad law. You know how I know he knows that? Because he initially indicated he was going to veto this law. When this law was passed by the legislature, when it was being considered by the legislature, he talked about how safe and secure and proud he was of the existing laws in New Hampshire. And he indicated he would veto this law. And yet what changed between that Governor Sununu and the Governor Sununu who quietly signed this law is two things. Number one, the timing of it meant that it doesn't take effect for the 2024 election. So Governor Sununu is leaving office. This is his last term. And so he has been able to sign a law that he won't have to live under as a politician. He won't have to face the electoral consequences of signing this law. That's number one. Number two is that the national mood among Republicans has changed. When this law was first proposed, it was seen as a very outside the mainstream law. And I think Governor Sununu recognized that and didn't want to be a part of that. What's happened since then is Republicans have embraced the false narrative, the lie about non-citizen voting. It has become central to their political arguments, not just their legal arguments, but their political arguments. They are trying to connect up the big lie, Donald Trump's lie about the elections, with their overall demonization of immigrants. And so they've done that by passing a series of laws claiming to be tackling non-citizen voting, when in fact, like I said, they really harm young voters. And Governorunu, I think, just decided that that's where the politics of the Republican Party are right now, and he is a Republican. And so going into the 2024 election, even though this law won't take effect, he can help perpetuate this false narrative that is now the dominant strain of election denialism within the Republican Party. And shame on him. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Democracy Docket. To stay up to date on what's happening in New Hampshire and around the country, please subscribe to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters. The team at Democracy Docket is working every day to help keep you informed about what is happening with democracy and the courts and the elections. Please subscribe to their newsletters. You will be happy you did. We'll see you next time.